What? Puchimoro from
This is Puchimoro from Bevacqua.
All right, and we are on.
Hey, after
Okay.
party, D18, KUM News. Let's get right to it. A great set of candidates tonight, and we've got an even greater set of analysts here. Let's start with from the Independence Task Force, Dr. Michael Bevacqua, outgoing senator. I love when we see you on the news, and you always hear that. Not seeking re-election. Senator Fernando Esteves, and from the Republican Party, he is the Legislative Committee Chair for the Republican Party of Guam, Mr. Benny Pinaula.
Thank you for having us.
And of course, my co-host Sabrina Salas-Manzanani. My name is Chris Barnett. Let's get right into it. Two Republicans, Democrat. And one of the questions I thought was interesting, and this is something that we're hearing in some of the gubernatorial forums and some of the gubernatorial teams talking about eliminating the position of the lieutenant governor.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's because of recent events or if they're just trying to target people, but what do you guys? First of all, what do you think of the answers, and then we'll get to what do you think of the question.
Oh, I could start. Well, I thought the answers were interesting, but I think the question was really interesting. And man, too bad we're not here talking about the gubernatorial candidates. But I'm just thinking, like, with everything we have going on, I mean, I'm talking macro problems. You name it: drugs, violence, fiscal crisis, and we're talking about, well, let's just get rid of this number 2 position. And that's a focus. And I think that those things fade, right? So I'm hoping that anybody running, at least for me as a voter, is focusing on the big problems, knows what the big problems are, and won't fall into that trap of, what's the bandwagon to jump on right now. I think that's important.
Yeah, and it is kind of a bandwagon issue. I think there's been talk of eliminating lieutenant governor, but ironically, from the Rodriguez Cruz team, they're talking about eliminating deputy directors. So. I was surprised we didn't see that question asked. Benny, I'm pretty sure you have strong feelings about this question.
Well, I've been around for a little bit, and I've seen these questions come up time and time again. And, part of it is really the current events, right, how things are moving through the system. And so those normally float up to the top, and after a while, it starts floating back to the bottom. I think when we look at government as a whole or any operation, you want to look at right sizing, you want to look at the right size for your government, whether that is removing positions or that's increasing position. The part that people sometimes fail to understand is government's there to serve you. So it's what you want, it's what services you like. And then government's job is to find those services and roll them out for you and for your families and for the community.
But I also think the questions that people are posting tonight does show that they are paying attention to the issues and are cognizant of what crisis the government in Guam is facing. I mean, they ask questions about
questions,
furloughs.
really good questions.
Right.
Legalizing marijuana as a possible revenue source. I mean, that was my takeaway from Bunker. I was like, legalize marijuana.
What, a 4th time? I said it.
I thought it was interesting. You had Jose A. San Augustine, who's he's heading Veterans Affairs. He's also a special assistant with the governor's office. And he's, it was really interesting to have Michelle and Jose sitting next to each other on the couch because it's a tale of two candidates. You have Jose A. San Augustine, not to be confused with Senator Joe San Augustine. I know a lot of people do that. But he's sheltered. He didn't have to resign, whereas Michelle came from a position at Department of Labor. It wasn't a protected position. Eventually she made the decision to pursue her candidacy as a senator and, wasn't able to hang on to her job. And I thought Jose San Augustine answered the question in an interesting way when he said, hey, coming from a military background, we've got to talk about the chain of command, boy. And I know that probably made some people at ILU pretty happy. And then Bunker, Bunker was like, let's let the people decide. Let's put this, I don't know if he meant put it on a referendum, but what do you think?
That's what it sounded like.
Well, I think, the lieutenant governor position can be pretty symbolic, but it can also be very important. And a lot of times it comes down to the personalities between the governor and the lieutenant governor, and if they can work together, if they can delegate. I mean, I think back into the past before we had an elected governor, you had the Secretary of Guam position. And sometimes that was a local, the most famous being Manny Guerrero, who eventually became governor.
Right.
But he was essential because the guy who was the governor was a guy from the States who in many cases had no idea where Guam was. One of those governors famously, when he got the call to become governor, he said, "Hold on," and he asked his son, "What's Guam?" The party's offering me to become the governor of Guam, but I don't know what it is. They got out a map and they found it, and then he accepted. He's like, okay, that sounds nice. So these guys would come over, and a lot of times they'd be here for a couple of years. They would do some symbolic stuff. They didn't really care. And so the person who was the secretary of Guam, which is the equivalent of the lieutenant governor, was essential in running the government operations. And so, unfortunately, as we get into party politics, the lieutenant governor becomes less important, and it becomes more like you're going to run later. You wait your turn, you're going to run later. You're groomed to become sort of the next generation of the party leadership.
Right.
But I wish that sort of more administrations would take the position where this is a paid employee of the government. This person could be effective. They could be productive. Could be.
Right, and I think it's something I was researching today with the Guam Election Commission has a sitting lieutenant governor ever gone on to be elected governor? In the immediately following the 8-year term, and it's never happened in the history of Guam.
That's true.
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting is with people talking about and this question being posed in these different forums. Should we eliminate the lieutenant governor position? I think it's an opportunity for us to kind of compare different lieutenant governors and, like you said, the nature of the relationship. Former Governor Felix Camacho, Lieutenant Governor Mike Cruz at times butted heads. Former Governor Gutierrez, Lieutenant Governor Madeline Berdallo. I mean, that was also an interesting relationship.
It can be. I mean, so the conflict can be valuable, right?
Yeah.
Because if you think about the way the Romans used to do it, right? You actually had co-presidents, two people elected who could veto each other because the Romans didn't want anybody having too much power. And in a lot of governments, that's actually how you distribute it, so that it's not that one person's at the top and then everyone else is underneath them, but that the two positions of power in a society can cancel each other out so that one person doesn't wreck the place.
Right.
And so sometimes having a lieutenant governor who is willing to speak the truth, willing to challenge the person who's the governor can be important. It's not usually the way it's done, right?
Yeah.
But it can.
But I think in this case, I mean, if I'm the lieutenant governor, and I totally disagree, I don't think we need to eliminate the lieutenant governor's position, but if I'm the lieutenant governor and that dialogue is happening and people are actually letting this question see the light of day, then if the governor leaves, I'm gonna, bust my ass and show you, what it's gonna be like if I'm gonna be governor. And I think that this is really an opportunity for, specifically in this case, Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio to kind of step up. Right?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
If you look back very, recently in our history, right, with Governor Paul Cavado and Lieutenant Governor Joe Atta,
Right.
They've had their issues, and how that happens and how that unfolds is really important for the people of Guam, especially when making a decision, right? If they cohesively work together and agree to disagree,
Right.
then I think it's a healthy environment for our people to make a valid, informative choice.
Yes.
And if Lieutenant Governor Tenorio and Governor Capo don't see eye to eye, I'm sure they have their disagreements behind closed doors, but
Behind closed doors.
when we see them working cohesively, it makes us as a people, feel reassured that our government is working in our interest.
Yeah.
Remember
So
Felix Camacho and Kaleo Moylan?
Yeah.
I mean, that one was a little bit out there, right? And
That wasn't behind closed doors.
yeah.
That was in your face.
I mean, there's a value to it. There's
Yeah.
a value to it because, it really is going to depend on who the lieutenant governor is.
Right.
But you really get the dynamic. I mean, as we see in the legislature, right, there's a benefit to multiple minds. And even in the executive branch,
Right.
I think, in a chief executive position, I think you see a lot of success with somebody who you would butt heads with. Right, somebody who doesn't always agree with you, because I think one of the most dangerous things is to surround yourself with people who are always going to pat you on the back and say yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we have the potential to lose touch of reality and make mistakes. So having that person that's going to challenge you. But aside from that, I think they're able to, if there's somebody that you can trust, I think they're able to be you when you're not there. So
Right.
like a special task, right? I could see a lieutenant governor also acting as inspector general, right? Making sure the government's running really efficiency. I know Senator Dennis Rodriguez brought that up as one of the things he wants to do and tackle. With the current administration, I think the lieutenant governor has done a great job with the Island Beautification Task Force, but some people
the czar of public safety.
And I think he's moved beyond that, because that was just traditionally something that, I mean, Madeline Bordallo did it, and it was something they kind of pigeonholed. And I think that was really just nature of the beast, where you would have a strong governor figure telling the lieutenant governor, like, hey, you go bush cut, go plant trees, you know what I mean? And they kind of would pigeonhole the LT into those positions. And I thought it was an interesting gesture when Governor Calvo, pretty much knighted LT Ray Tenorio with being the czar of public safety.
Yeah, I think, again, every dynamic is different, and that's why I think we would actually be losing something. I can understand it saves money, but I think if you miss out on the opportunity of having such a dynamic and strong leadership team, I think in the long run we would just miss out on the opportunity because we're trying to save a buck, and there are much bigger problems. And
all right, so Ron McNinn, she's not here, but he's watching and he's commenting. Another guest analyst from Facebook. Right. It is nonsense to eliminate the lieutenant governor position.
Totally,
I
agree.
Let's just move on.
Okay.
But you know what I think was interesting.
What would the line of succession be? Succession be like, would the speaker then become the acting governor? Would the governor's dog become the acting governor? Like,
but I mean, hey, it's an interesting question, and we talked about it for a bunch of minutes. So I think it's and it's kind of interesting with Jose A. San Augustine, and I think this also goes for Lieutenant Governor Ray, is I think that there has to be some daylight put between what's going on in this administration and what's going to happen if the Republicans take ad loop, and even with the legislature, you have Republican senators, you know what I mean? Because I think they need to show how they're different. And Jose A. San Augustine, even though he's a special assistant at ad loop, he really did have some kind of different ideas.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think he presented himself well, so I think the experience and the background he comes from, it really showed. He might have even said things that, when he was asked questions that I might not agree with, right, personally. But, I mean, I can respect his position,
right.
and that's saying a lot, actually,
Actually, when you look at how our forefathers formed our government, right, this is what they were talking about. They wanted ordinary people, a farmer. They wanted ordinary people, karate expert, they wanted an ordinary person,
right,
a bunker to come in and participate in government.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't just the elites that ran our government, that ordinary grassroots people could participate.
And I think we had a good cross-section of that tonight.
Absolutely.
Although, technically, the GovGuam was created by the U.S. Congress.
True.
And technically, when the U.S. started, they actually did create a bunch of safeguards to keep regular people from participating in the government at the beginning of the United States.
But what they wanted you to believe was that anybody could do it.
But we're just so disattentive, so here we are.
Well, no, it's always a good reminder that people pushed. People demanded more power,
right?
And so, just like here on Guam, people should demand more power.
I know that we tend to romanticize the founding fathers, right? Yeah. So, what about what Michelle said, which I felt was really interesting about raising taxes? She said, "No, don't raise taxes."
I loved it, right? And even being in there, I've kind of got caught in that. It's a tough position.
Yeah.
You have your core values and you're like, yeah, I'll stick to it. But when the human aspect comes into it and you take that into consideration, it's not about you. It's not just about what you believe. It's not just about your principles. And that can really have an effect. So, even though I'd be, never want to raise taxes, conservative Republican, and then you start hearing the stories of, the GovGuam employee might be losing their job or this, and they're a good worker. Or then you start hearing about the family who would be affected by the tax. It's very difficult to handle. So I think the answer was good. I think the answer was good. I think
I think too, right? Not raising taxes is a good thing, but I think we also have to look at what is a fair tax. What is fair for everybody?
Right.
We're all in this together, and so is fairness, not raising taxes, or is it raising taxes? And if we look at it at that angle, I think we can come to a amicable conclusion with everybody participating and help with the heavy lifting, because we are going to be affected one way or the other. And so who's going to be holding the bucket here? Is it going to be the taxpayer? Is it going to be the government? And so we got to look at what is fair for everybody.
Right. And I think, I mean, I don't feel like Michelle's answer was a safe answer. And I know a lot of the people who've sat on that couch, we've heard a lot, hey, don't raise taxes. But, you know, at the end of the day, people bring up the analogy and they compare Guam to California, of course. I'm pretty sure, you know, where the political status is a little different. And they say, hey, you know, you go to the States, you drive on good roads, you do this, you do that. You know, they've got great facilities. Well, they pay more taxes. And I mean, is that something that we need to kind of examine on Guam? Because
No, the model doesn't necessarily work one for one. I mean, there are so many layers of their government. People forget that the government of Guam acts as a federal entity, acts as a local,
right, yeah.
a state, a municipal, so many different layers to it. And so while you have all these different responsibilities, you don't have the layers of funding sources. And so when people talk about taxation in the States, there's so many layers of taxation they might not see or feel, or they just get used to it. But if you look at it, even the poorest states would get, I think in 2016, like $2.75 on the U.S. dollar they put as a federal taxpayer, because they spread out the tax money evenly between the poor states and the rich states. So they see a lot more benefit to the federal tax dollars that they put in there. They got a lot more of a return, plus the increased taxes. So it's a balance, Chris. It's a balance.
what about marijuana? Marijuana question. Obviously, Bunker was that was his issue.
You got to do it soon before everyone else in the world does it.
Right. Yeah.
That's the thing, is if you want it to be a real moneymaker, you got to do it sooner rather than later. Because
Right.
if you wait too long, then basically, because a lot of other markets are looking into it now.
Yeah.
I mean, Guam could become sort of the premier destination for that type of tourism in the Pacific if it acted soon. If it
Soon.
waits too long, Hawaii soon could try to do
Yeah.
it.
Right.
Or
And-
other islands could basically do that, and there's a huge
I
market.
mean, can you
for it.
imagine if Palau legalized recreational marijuana? I mean,
Yeah.
my
Yeah,
God, that would
exactly.
just,
You know, it's weird. I hear a lot of the senatorial candidates coming
Right.
out saying, yeah, I want to do this, and this is their main thing. And I'm just like, man, why hasn't anyone just pushed for the referendum? You know, when this came up, I think, and I looked into this, I think the governor at one point had proposed it in legislation, and my interpretation and understanding of the Organic Act is, as a senator, as a creation of the U.S. Congress, I can't even vote for that. If I vote for that and it passes, it's automatically null and void. But the bypass of that is a referendum. Same thing with
Right.
medicinal. So even though I can't vote for it, nothing precludes the people of Guam from putting it into law and us supporting that. So I think if there is a movement out there, and if it really is building up, somebody just needs to take the bull by the horn and push for that referendum.
yeah. And I mean, this is something we say every time we talk about this in the after party. I don't know what we're waiting for. I feel like we're behind the curve on medicinal marijuana. We've seen what the red tape and the bureaucracy can do to that. The people decided on that, and recreational weed. Benny, I'm curious what you think.
Oh, you know, one side of me, especially for those who really need the medicinal marijuana, I think we got to get it to them quicker than we're doing it now. These people are suffering, and they need it, and it will help them with their recovery or what they're going through. The other part of me is, you know, there's other ways to make money. You know, if that's what your angle is, you know, you want to get rich quick. There's technology that we can take advantage of. I believe that our people, we haven't reached our pinnacle yet. I think, you know, education, you know, is a great route for us to go through. Business, entrepreneurship. There's so many things that Guam has to offer. And, you know, marijuana is probably part of that ingredient, part of that recipe, but it shouldn't be the overriding ingredient of what we're trying to create here on Guam. And that's, a safe environment for our families and our
So
people.
That's a no.
Yeah,
It's
that's like a maybe.
It-
Almost.
It's what the people want, right? It's not what
Right,
we
right,
want.
right.
It's what the people want.
I mean, you talk about, you know, these education, all these things. Well, I just feel like it's a no-brainer. I mean, recreational marijuana, especially early in the game, for our part of the world. I mean, it's going to be raining money for education. I mean, the kids are going to have like 3 iPads each in the.
That's why I know why you just pointed directly to the guy with the big beard.
Right.
Eat the
right.
marijuana.
What about self-determination?
That was interesting.
I love that the question keeps coming up. I
Yeah.
think for all those that don't think it's an important issue, you know, yeah, maybe polls will say otherwise, but this is the grassroots back kitchen talk, and there is power there. that spreads. It's quick. So I'm glad that the question keeps coming up. I think it encourages leaders to learn about it and take a position. Look, I mean, I got nothing against Joe St. Augustine, but when he confidently said, status quo,
Right.
Maybe he knew what he's talking about and he was really talking about his preference, or maybe he just really doesn't know what the three options are. And that leaves me wondering, he's going to be my representative. Is he aware of the issues, why it's important, and how it even affects policy?
Right.
Michelle was quick, though. She corrected him that
Yep.
status quo was not an option.
Yeah.
But then she said
free
independence
association.
or statehood.
No, I
Well,
think
no,
he
she
said
was
free
going with her
association.
order.
Right.
She said,
I see.
free
Yeah.
association, but I think what I liked is first off, she said, whatever the people of Guam decide. I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
You can't go into decolonization thinking you're going to get what you want, right?
Yes.
We're part of the process, and I think we all kind of agree that we're going to have to respect what the outcome is, as long as it's a good plebiscite.
Right.
Wait, what did Bunker say? Because that just.
I think he said
going.
more sovereignty with not as much democracy.
Oh yeah.
And the status quo, right? I mean, and not to go to bat for Jose St. Augustine, but if you look at it this way: if you ask somebody, what kind of ice cream do they want, and the choices are mango, vanilla, chocolate, and they say, no, I like strawberry ice cream, and you're like, no, you can't have strawberry ice cream. I mean, a lot of people feel, even if it's not an option, and I don't know if he said that out of ignorance, that they like things the way they are. And I mean, I'm sure if a candidate ran on that platform, they would probably get a lot of support.
You're
as
absolutely
ignorant-
right.
You're right.
as
Mary
ignorant as it
Torres
is.
said when
Yeah.
she came on about we need to update the law, so the options are for modern day Chamorros and how we feel now.
Well,
because maybe
that's-
those three
that's-
options aren't.
No, and I see where, and we talked about this. I see where she's coming from. I don't think status quo needs to be an option, but I mean, like we're stuck in this car. The windows rolled up,
Yeah.
the doors are locked, and it's got to be free association, independent statehood. And maybe it's just that people don't. And Julius brought this up: free association, and Adrian always says it could be this or it could be that. But I mean, I just feel like we're on this road.
if you wanted to change to three options,
Right.
it would be better to reduce it to two: autonomy and integration. So, because traditionally, in the first generation of plebiscites like that, it was really just, do you want to be independent or do you want to be part of the colonizer?
Right.
And those were the only two options. Eventually, they started to add in this free association option because the British had started to develop it with their colonies so that they could still retain a close relationship to them, but then not make them fully independent. And so the UN said, look, if you want free association, you can have that. It's this new status that's developing, but it's meant to be like a temporary status.
Right.
But so if you wanted to change it, you could reduce it to two options. Basically, would you like to have more local autonomy, more control, more local control over affairs, or would you like to be integrated into the United States? And so you could change the law like that. I mean, some other places do that. I would advise against adding any more options.
Right.
Because I always give the example of the Virgin Islands, which once had like 7 options on one of their plebiscites, and they've never had another since.
Free association A, independent.
Well, Puerto
like
Rico
6
has
or
similar
7.
problems because
Right.
of that.
Oh yeah, and Puerto Rico is, and so you don't want to flood it with options because you don't want to cater to all of the different minute possibilities.
Right.
Because it's a direction.
Yeah.
Are you moving in this direction? Do you want to move in this direction? There's benefits, there's downsides to everything, but you want a guide. As you said, you're whatever you choose is not actually what you're going to get immediately, but can you pick a guide, sort of like a star? Which star sort of do you want to sail under for a while?
And I'm surprised we haven't had a status quo candidate. You know what I mean? It's just
Hey,
interesting.
we had one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right there.
Oh no, sorry, no.
But that conversation is also out there too as well with the families. A lot of people you ask, they like the way things are today, and they feel fine with just the way things are at, and they like to keep it status quo. Although they know that there's a referendum out there.
Right.
They like to keep it the way it is.
And I mean, I don't know if that's. I know Doc would probably say, "Oh, they're colonized," maybe.
Or no, not
Yeah.
necessarily. I mean, I think for me, it's you have to kind of look at the larger picture, right? Is that Robert Underwood once said, "We are a colony, but we're a very comfortable colony."
Right.
Compared to a lot of other colonies in history, we're pretty comfortable. But you have to kind of look at as Joe Addis says, look at your economic drivers. Do you have control over them?
Nope.
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't, not at all. So even if you control them for the moment, the mechanisms are in place where the United States, if the United States and Japan suddenly didn't like each other anymore, well, there goes the rest of the Japanese tourist market. If the United States decides suddenly that they want to get rid of some of the exemptions from the Jones Act that Guam is eligible for, then the prices start going up. So our status is connected to every part of our lives.
Right. Yeah.
But part of the problem is that the leaders and the educational system don't put it out there so that people can kind of understand.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean that'll be the day.
Well, let's
Right.
critique each of the candidates and how you think they performed and answered and responded to the questions, starting with Yonko Benny with Jose. Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of respect for him. 30 years in the Marine Corps, that says a lot, you know, that kind of a commitment. He says he's passionate. I truly believe he is passionate. His answers, you know, again, I chalk it up to nerves. 30 seconds is not a lot of time. But I think overall he did well. Michelle, I think of the three, did the best. She seemed very prepared. She seemed very on top of what her answers were going to be. And the one thing I liked the most from her response is allowing the people to make the decision, not the lawmakers. You know, she understands her role as a senator. And I think Bunker did. He came in and he had his one agenda that he wanted to let everybody know. And I don't think he mince words. He knows what he wants and what he's for. So I give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah,
as well.
I think Bunker was, you know, we always say we want grassroots people, and then when we get them, we just pick them apart. And you know, I think Bunker, I mean, he was very consistent on his answers. You know, it was all pretty much indigenous rights, marijuana, and grassroots. I agree with you. I think Michelle did do the best, and you know, she's been here before, and I thought her answers were articulate, and you know, she was courageous on some of them. Jose San Augustine, I think he's got maybe it was nerves.
Yeah.
But I still think he's got a
comfortable. All three of them seem so
yeah,
comfortable.
and he's also ran before. I think he should play up the veterans issues a little more. You know,
I mean,
Veterans Affairs.
What I can see, and again, I'm new to politics, and you look at candidates, Democrat, Republican in the past, the veteran card, like that being your white horse, has never worked. Because veterans, you know, as a veteran, I know that, look, hey, I'm a veteran, but that doesn't define me, right? I'm everything else, and I happen to be a veteran, right? All the same issues that bother people bother me. And I think it can be real easy to kind of lose that and hone in on that thing.
And I find that interesting.
Also
in that,
director of DOC.
Yeah, well, you don't want to brag about that, though.
Yeah, no, if I had to...
Who's going to run on the... I was the director of DOC. I mean, like, cut that off my resume.
Litsky was the director of DOC.
Right, yeah. It was a different time, though.
Very different time.
You know, going back to the veteran thing, I find it very interesting that a lot of times, even in national politics, the people who use the veterans as kind of like the big shield and prop them up there are people who had like no military service, or they want to appear to be, you know.
And you know, that's a great point. I think what we're seeing here in today's politics, you know, is a changing of the guard. At one time, that was very important to have that on your resume, right? That you served in the military. We have a president of the United States never served in the military.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to him, you know, everybody, you know.
Bone spurs.
So you're seeing this dynamic play out here on Guam as well.
Yeah.
I think back to the veteran deal. I think on Guam too, especially because we're so saturated, and that's a good thing, right? You know, in the States, it's kind of like you could be the only veteran for 100 miles,
right? Yeah,
and they make you feel like a hero, which is a good thing. But on Guam, I think, you know, we're more chill about it, right? Because you know, hey, you've been there, you've been over there. This guy was over in Vietnam or Desert Storm, and you know, we're comfortable with that. We can connect and relate on that, but we'd rather get to know each other on so many other levels. And so I think it's a great in as a candidate. But I think what really showed tonight was Joe San Augustine really showed, Jose San Augustine.
Yeah, Jose.
Showed a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
So I would say confidence, comfortable, super comfortable.
Relax.
And-
Chill.
and that's good, right? Because it kind of displayed their personalities. You know, they put it out when they put themselves out there.
Right.
So I think it was a really good show. Sorry, you know, if I'm talking a lot. I am tired.
Yeah.
It's been a long.
I know you've been talking
Day.
all day down
I
there.
know.
Oh,
Talking all
man.
day, talking all night.
I know. It's just starting to come out now. I'm just gonna stop and let
I thought it was
But this
interesting
is a-
when Jose said he was a full-time farmer.
I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, don't you
I
got
was
a
like,
day
you got a
job?
full-time job.
No, I think, I mean, I think that would be something, you know, that he should push out there more, because
Right.
being a veteran on Guam Guam is the island of veterans.
Right,
So
right, yeah.
in some ways, that's why it isn't as politically sort of powerful as maybe it should be. But being a farmer nowadays is totally different. It basically, you know, they say that, you know, politicians are all talk. You're just kind of talking about things. But then if you're somebody who's working the land, you're decreasing our dependency on imported food. You're sort of working the island in that way. That's you know, that's something that harkens back to an older time when people were stronger, when people were tougher. I mean, yeah, you should play that up. I mean, because you won't find a lot of farmer politicians in the States. I
Yeah.
mean, especially not in D.C.
I mean, Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer, but I think he actually owned the peanut farm.
I think he had to sell it too when
Right.
he got elected.
No, with
on
the
the farm,
veterans,
too.
Senator Esteves, going back to the veterans thing, you got there was a senator back, I don't know if it was the late Speaker on Pinko, but right now we're looking at the veterans, the health care for the veterans. I mean, this is an issue that I think, I'm surprised hasn't been more galvanized on Guam. There was a report that came out about, you know, veterans health care on island and just, you know, in the region and also nationally. This is something that maybe
Well-
with Jose's experience, he could kind of put out there as one of the issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is reach. I mean, the same things that is great about Guam can also be some of the things that are bad about Guam. We have so many veterans, and people are just comfortable with that, and they don't always come out and admit it. I think the
Right.
most difficult part, especially with medical care, would be getting veterans to register, and then the veterans, at least the clinic is based on the veterans that qualify for health care. So it's all data and numbers driven. But, you know, I put out, and I'm surprised they haven't really kind of really ridden this forward. And I said, hey, you know, we have a gubernatorial campaign going on. What if all the candidates went out there when they're out there canvassing house to house? Why are they not registering veterans or, you know, taking part in that? I think you're not going to see people go out there and survey as much as that unless they're doing the census.
Right.
But I think consistently doing and taking those options, you'll find a lot of homeless veterans in the jungle living in camps.
Right.
And those are the difficulties that we have in trying to address that. And once we have the data, now we just have to find somebody who's going to listen on the federal side. And that can be also very problematic.
We should have
Yeah.
a veteran run for Congress.
You know, my grandfather was a member of the Insular Guard. So after the war, he was one of the guys who went around and, you know, took out Japanese straggler soldiers. And eventually, many years, decades later, they were declared kind of honorary Marines. And so he became entitled to veterans' health care benefits. But sadly, by the time he did, he was already sick. And so basically, the last part of his life was spent in and out of Naval Hospital, and it was, you know, too little too late. And I just think back to that time, if we had somebody who was really pushing that issue on the federal level, that, you know, I mean, I'm not saying, you know, Uncle Sam killed my grandfather, but I just think it's just an example of how we're neglected, and veterans, I mean, here and, you know, in other places as well.
You'd be surprised how common the theme is and the thread is when it comes to service members from indigenous communities. I mean, you've seen it, and you can study the history of the Native Americans, Native Hawaiians. It's a common thread. I think people who grow up in a colonized society, and correct me if I'm wrong, this comes from personal experience and research. When this is what you know, you have a tendency to want to show, you know, Benedosi, yeah, I'm really American. Like, watch me, I'm gonna go to war. You know, watch me, I'm gonna be the best. And sometimes those are great drivers, because we make very good service members.
Yeah.
Everything and all the discipline and the values we take from home, we make very good service members. But it's kind of realizing what got you there, because after all of that, after the illusion is kind of over and the cloud is shifted and you're left injured, you know,
PTSD.
You know, PTSD, a lot of different things that have affected your life in a negative way, then you realize, like, you know, what was it for? And I've talked to a lot of veterans and fellow disabled veterans. It's a tough position where there's a dichotomy of feelings, right? It's like, I'm angry, but I still love what I did. I'm still proud of what I did. I'm still grateful for the service, but I'm hurting and I'm frustrated, and
Right.
they live with this conflict.
Yeah, it's like that conflicted identity, right? Because so many of the first generation that really joined to kind of pay back the United States, prove they were good Americans, and then, you know, you had Chamorros that went to Vietnam that basically were told, you know, you're a gook.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see anything suspicious from you,
Well,
then we're going to take you out.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
You had
yeah,
Chamorros that
yeah.
had to constantly fight with their own officers. You had Chamorros who experienced all sorts of stuff like that. Some of them that are still trying to get recognition because they were qualified for medals of honor, but downgraded because they weren't white. And so all of that sort of stuff, you sign up because you want to prove you're American. You want to show, like, I'm just like American, like everyone else. But then America reminds you in so many other ways that you're not really like us.
You know, when
You're far away.
Before
You're too far
we,
away for us to give you adequate medical care.
because I know what people are out there thinking right now, right? When we go there and because I've gotten the feedback on this. Oh, you know, okay, yeah, that's in the past. Stop hating on America. And, you know, because I know we get really deep into our stories and we tell, but I think we're still very much an oral tradition, right? You don't see these stories in books, you know.
Yeah.
I was named after my uncle Fernando, Lo Mateke Vietnam, right? It was soldier, did it, and I was guilty of it. You know, when I joined was the height of the war in Iraq, and I said, you know what? I'm 18, I can enlist. If those guys can go to war, right, why am I sitting here? I should be able to go too, right? I should do my part. And that was my wholehearted thinking,
Right.
running
Yeah.
towards the battlefield.
Yeah.
And like, whoa.
See, I was in the Air Force. We had it better.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Well,
get
I think
back on the
it's-
Oh, wow.
candidates.
Right,
Sorry.
right. No, but
So
I'm saying
I wanted to
if we
hear-
can
Extra-
talk
YouTube
about this
extra.
issue of
Veterans
veterans
Hour.
and the healthcare, then, you know, I think maybe the onus should be on some of these candidates running to kind of take up that cause.
Right.
Go ahead.
And work with the Congress.
The bureaucracy is keeping us on
Yeah.
point.
We didn't hear from you, Mike, on your takeaways from the three candidates
Oh.
that came on.
I shared some of them. I thought, I really think that the two San Augustines should run together as governor and lieutenant governor. San Augustine and San Augustine. I think that would be fun. No, but no, I really liked that. As I said before, that he sort of highlighted that he's a farmer, because I think that's an example of, you know, you want grassroots, you know, somebody like that. For Michelle, I thought she was the most personable, sort of, you know, she made some jokes in there, and that's always
Yeah.
good too, because, you know, you want people, there's so many candidates running. You want to basically make a connection with people, and, you know, and so sort of throwing in that humor is very, very important. And so I thought that she sort of stood out in that regard. And then for your cousin, your primo,
Yeah.
who was sitting over here.
My primo too, I found out.
Right.
I mean, I have to echo what you said. People are always talking about the grassroots. So then, you know, when you see grassroots candidates, it's almost kind of like, you know, don't just make fun of them, but actually think you can improve them.
Yeah.
You can talk to them. You can share your ideas with them. You can help them grow. You can help them get better. I mean, the example I always give for that is Angel Santos, a veteran who joined to be an American and then sort of had his consciousness awakened. Angel Santos, when he ran for senator, you know, he was a grassroots candidate who met with a lot of poor Filipinos, poor Chamorros, poor Micronesians, and basically they talked to him, and he realized that, you know what, I'm standing for Chamorro rights, but I should really be standing for the downtrodden on this island in general, because the government and the federal government, the local government isn't watching out for them. And so for the grassroots candidates, I mean, even if they're rough around the edges, it's up to the people to talk to them,
Right.
you know, and help sort of get them ready for the campaign.
Absolutely.
I gotta agree though. I think Michelle and with Janae Uggan, they kind of represent this different. First of all, and just in looking for analysts for the after party, we have a real problem finding women to represent the Republican side of things. And you know, Bree and I was sitting here and go like, who can we call? I mean, there are just a ton of women, and I don't know if that's a reflection on the parties, but you know, obviously the Independence Task Force, you guys are like Matsutsuda already with women. But I think it's really refreshing to see candidates like Janae Uggan and Michelle running as Republicans.
And Amanda.
They really, and Amanda, and they really stick out. And I loved how Michelle had that little flower in her hair. That was
no, it was great. It was great.
I like the way
Girl.
she brought up
Yeah.
the black belt.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think they're good, and I think that it's really on the Republican Party to kind of get those candidates out there. You know what I mean? Fortunately for the Republicans, they don't have to go to 4 different gubernatorial pocket meetings. They've just got the one. So I think that they could really benefit from that machinery, especially the ones who are kind of outside of the Adelup sphere, like Janae and Michelle and Amanda now, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So
You got
I think
Amanda, you
it's,
got Tello too as well.
Oh yeah, that's
Right.
right.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
You got
so
Mary
sorry, Tello.
Torres.
of course Mary Torres, yeah. So
I think I
but,
forgot
yeah.
about Mary because for me, I think she's like already there.
Right,
You know.
right, yeah.
Already there, already sitting, already ready to receive all the new candidates coming in.
Right.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for the after party.
Good talk, guys.
Thank
Always
you
a
very much for having
pleasure.
us. Absolutely. Thank
So
you,
who we got?
KUM.
What we got next week?
Next week, Monday, I have to pull it up because I
Sorry.
didn't remember who's on next week.
Well, I know one of our analysts is going to be former Senator Carlotta Leon Guerrero, who I was talking with her this
yeah.
morning. She's actually pretty active. Might surprise you on which side of the aisle she's active in lately. And then we're going to have from the Independence Task Force Ken Cooper.
I think we
come
might
back.
have Ron, I'm not sure.
And I think we are going to have Dr. Ramaganj. So it's a pretty good cross section
That
of
is
people.
cool. That's
Nice.
good.
And our candidates?
A lot of
Candidates.
intellectuals.
Incumbent Senator Therese Jalahi, Kelly Marsh, and Adolfo Palacios.
There you go. It's going to be a great show. And on behalf of our panelists, of course, Uncle Benny, Senator Fernando, and Dr. Bevacqua, Serena Salas Mantanani, this has been and another one, After Party, D18 KUAM News. My name is Chris Barnett. Thanks for watching. Hasta adios.
Bye.